Ours is called The Evolution of Women's Rights. Before we get into all of the adaptations, we first need to ask ourselves some questions.
What does it mean to be a woman? Being a woman is more than our appearance and our bodies. It means to be comfortable within one's own skin and still be willing to aim for personal growth. It means not only to expect to be respected, but also to give it in return, as that is a value that is commonly forgotten along the way. These values should obviously not only be applied to one gender, but to all. Everyone deserves a voice that allows them to be heard, even women. Women should be an active representation of possibility and success in order to encourage others among their own community and beyond.
The next question is, how important is equality to society as a whole? Equality is of major importance to our development as a society. As long as one group dominates a population, growth is completely hindered. Different people bring different things to the table. And once you break out of stereotypes, you can see this. As time passes, our world must adapt. Not only does equality introduce new ideas, but it's just common sense. Being stuck with primitive ideas of inequality doesn't allow for this natural adaptation to occur.
One of the first topics that comes to mind is reproductive rights. Reproductive rights are a controversial subject that consists of many sides and points of view. The American Civil Liberties Union determined that in the U.S., only 13 states support reproductive rights. Only 13 states believe that a woman should be allowed to decide if and when to be a mother. To fully understand this topic, we must know the reproductive norms of the past. It was believed that womanhood and motherhood were interchangeable terms. It wasn't until women like Margaret Sanger joined the feminist movement that society was faced with the fact that the biological ability to reproduce should not define a woman's purpose and identity. Though Sanger's efforts mainly focused on birth control, she fully advocated for reproductive freedom and even founded the American Birth Control League, which prompted the establishment of Planned Parenthood in 1942. American society shifted drastically during the Progressive Era, but to this day, state governments continue to limit access to birth control and abortions without having any consideration for a woman's right over her own body. The people making these decisions typically lack an understanding of the impact that motherhood can have on a woman's life under difficult or inconvenient circumstances. For example, in 2014, 75% of abortions were performed among low-income patients because they could not afford to take care of a child. Many are quick to suggest alternatives like adoption, but what if possible healthcare costs and the pain that giving the child away might cause the mother, or the thousands of children that are already in the foster system? Not to mention teen pregnancies, which can be very dangerous for the patient and victims of rape. Adapting to a society that is hostile towards reproductive freedom entails fighting for women's right to choice and not to conform to restrictive laws.
Here's Margaret Sanger. And here is a timeline of the reproductive rights of women.
This is very vague, but basically in the 1880s, abortion is criminalized. In 1910, it's made illegal nationwide, which causes unsafe illegal abortions in the 1930s and leads to nearly 2,700 women to die. Abortion reform begins in the 1960s to the early 1970s. A few states fully repealed the restrictive laws, while others only restricted it unless it was a patient with physical or mental health problems and victims of rape or incest. And some cases even established that 14th Amendment protects the right to abortion. And then the Hyde Amendment in 1976 was a discriminatory policy that does not allow federal funds to cover abortion services. It is still currently implemented in 34 states. In 2007, Gonzalez v. Carhart, the Supreme Court upholds the first federal legislation to criminalize abortion. In Gonzalez v. Planned Parenthood, the Supreme Court overruled that a patient's health must be considered in abortion restriction laws. In 2016, Whole Woman's Health v. Heller said the Supreme Court ruled that 2 Texas abortion restrictions were unconstitutional. But in 2021, the 6-week ban was implemented. It is a law that bans abortion at 6 weeks, which is before most know that they are pregnant.
So next we have workplace rights. There have always been obvious differences between the workplace rights of women and men throughout history. The main points of contention have tended to be equal pay and the discrimination women still face to this day. So some of the major points in history are, in 1912, Massachusetts became the first state to set a minimum wage. For women, it stated that average and able women should be able to receive the necessary amount, to take care of themselves which was estimated to be around $10.60. Now, no employer really ever paid that much, but employers who severely underpaid their workers were actually, exposed in the newspapers at the time. In 1919, when these issues were even more prevalent, the International Congress of Working Women was founded. These ladies met to discuss many things, one point being maternity insurance. This was, where motherhood and workplace overlapped. The workplace was so used to men's rights that it at first failed to accommodate what these women needed. And in 1923, activists introduced the Equal Rights Amendment. One of the main issues these activists were tackling was the major pay difference. Payment disparities continue to be an issue to this day. In 2009, the Council on Women and Girls was formed by President Obama to help combat this issue. However, by 2017, 42% of women still face some sort of discrimination at work. This can be seen in men making more in the same position as women, and even sexual harassment. At the rate things are going, it is actually estimated that there won't be equal pay between men and women until 2059. Women still only make 81.6 cents for every dollar that a man can make.
Another thing in which women's rights have evolved is education. And out of everything that our presentation will cover, education is probably the department that has attained the most equality. That does not mean that it fully embraces the value of women, but now women have access to many opportunities for academic success. And education allows people to improve their economic and work opportunities, two things that everyone deserves. Before education reform began in the progressive era, students only received the education that was considered necessary. Primary school was typically as far as women made it because of the notion that they only needed enough literary knowledge to run their future husband's household. In fact, the few women who obtained a college education were judged and looked down on by narrow-minded conservatives. Women's suffrage was made possible by the 19th Amendment in 1990. Since then, many women have received a proper education with the purpose of opening doors that would lead them to success. The evidence is everywhere. During the years of 2018 and 2019, 57% of the 2 million bachelor's degrees that were awarded by post-secondary institutions in the U.S. were completed by women. We don't have to live so far. We're part of the collegiate high school program here at College in the Mainland, where high school students, many of them women, are working toward their associate degree. It is extremely important that we give everyone the right to an education, because with an educated population, we can have an educated society free of ignorance.
Literature has been one of the things that have been impacted over the years. There were many talented female writers in the 20th century and earlier. However, it was much harder for women than it was for men. Much like the other careers, it was mostly male-dominated, and even to this day, authors are 83% men. However, authors like Charlotte Brontë, Virginia Woolf, and Jane Austen have helped carve out space for women authors. Charlotte Brontë wrote Jane Eyre, A Room of One's Own was written by Virginia Woolf, and Pride and Prejudice was written by Jane Austen. In the beginning, many female authors had to publish under male pseudonyms to get their work published. Jane Eyre was originally published under the name of Currer Bell. One book that stood out to me was A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. It was extremely relevant to this topic we're covering. It discusses the way that women had to make a space for themselves in their overly male-dominated world. These books helped authors like Margaret Atwood, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and Caitlin Moran make a name for themselves. They get to publish their stories with their own names, and can even freely discuss their struggles as a woman and their personal adaptations in this world. Now stories like We Should All Be Feminists and How to Be a Woman can be published without as much trouble as it would have been in the past. Here's Virginia Woolf. And here's our bibliography.
For Paris and Jocelyn, one of your initial questions was, what does it mean to be a woman? And so I'm just curious what you learned about what it means to be a woman through this research paper.
Well, I think it means mainly to have strength, because obviously, even though society has progressed a lot, there is still a lot of discrimination. So we have to learn how to deal with that.
I think it also means like community and boosting up other women, because obviously, we have to support each other to have this strength and to continue making change happen, because without each other, we can't change much at all.
Question for Paris and Jocelyn. Do you think the word feminism has changed in its meaning? Because a lot of intersectional feminists, they refer to themselves now as womanists. So do you think the term has changed in its meaning from inception?
I think feminism has definitely changed. At first it was used to boost it up, but I think a lot of people kind of, when they hear it, think negatively, just because of how, the internet has shifted what it means to be a feminism or a feminist. So yeah, I think it definitely has changed a lot over time, even if it is kind of negative now.
For Karis and Jocelyn, does any one area that you covered stand out as needing change more than any other?
Reproductive rights, definitely. I understand that it's very controversial and that a lot of people don't think it's right, but I think that a woman should be able to choose if she wants to be a mother or not.
I think I think the payment disparities, because like I said, it's not expected to be equal until 2059, and I think that is just too slow. I think some real change could be made and needs to be made.
Thank you.
For Karis and Jocelyn, with a solid 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court now, and several of the recent nominees saying they did not consider Roe v. Wade to be settled law, when the right test case gets to the Supreme Court, do you think they will flat out overturn Roe v. Wade, or will they continue the SB 8 tactic of slowly chipping away at reproductive rights?
I think that it's most likely going to work against women's rights, just because a lot of times that's how it turns out. But it will definitely help. It will be a reason for women to just fight harder for what they believe in.
I think it'll be slowly chipped away at, just because, like I said, things have been kind of slow, and I expect it to kind of continue that way.